So, I've previously criticized YouTuber Super Eyepatchwolf for defining good art as inherently challenging or existential in nature.
With Riverdale, sometimes I don't need a deep dive into the human condition or to be confronted with the existentialism of my own mortality. Sometimes I just need to laugh and howl as life's ills fall away in the blazing spectacle of a show that has completely lost its mind.
And if a deep dive into the human condition or being confronted with the existentialism of his own mortality is his definition of good art, then that's fine. But I think that is such a limiting perspective on the nature of beauty. And I didn't really think I'd talk about it again, but recently, YouTuber Laura Crone made a banger 3.5 hour long video where she expressed a similar sentiment.
Sometimes I want bad art, and not just to laugh at. I love to read books that challenge me intellectually and emotionally, and teach me new things about the world and about the written word, and connect me to the legacy of the novel as an art form and the English language itself. But I do not have the energy to read House of Leaves likes for 52 weeks a year. I just don't. Sometimes I'm fucking tired.
Just like with Super Eyepatchwolf, I didn't quite vibe with that definition of good art, but I wasn't going to dwell on it. But then, later that same day, I was watching a podcast in media processing. A YouTuber who has a great video on Mamma Mia 2 said the exact same thing.
I don't know if this is a good movie, but I had a really good time watching it. Like, it's not like peak. It didn't like tell me new things about the human experience in a deep, resonant way and changed me forever. But it also like was a really good time.
And something in my brain just exploded. All three of these creators are much smarter and much more beautiful than me, and typically, I find myself agreeing with them about the essence of arts and beauty. So, maybe they're right, and my definition of beauty is the one that's flawed. Maybe I should just drop it. I mean, really, it's just one sentence they said in hours of content. Am I really going to make an entire video disagreeing with them? Yes, I am. So, let me give you some context. Super Eyepatchwolf said this in a video called Riverdale, the show that went completely insane. In this video, he explains the chaotic beauty of the CW show Riverdale and why he likes it. Laura Crone said this in a video where she analyzed the literary work of thriller novel author Riley Sager. She was defending her fondness for his work even though she doesn't necessarily think his books are well written. Media Processing made his comment on a podcast while talking about the film Ready or Not. All three of these YouTubers were arguing for the value of bad, or at the very least not particularly good media, which I think is a good thing to do. There is definitely value in media that possesses traits that culturally we don't define as good. But the problem is, when they made this distinction, they either purposefully or inadvertently created a standard for good art, and I cannot suffer that. Because when they did that, they put what is good inside of a box. They created a word where good art challenges us intellectually and emotionally, or is a deep dive into the human condition. They created a word where good art is not simple or comforting. And I disagree. Putting aside whether I believe they're correct about the quality of any of the art in question, although, notably, judging by her 30-minute video on it, I'm pretty sure Laura Crone would definitively categorize Ready or Not as good art, even if media processing seems to be unsure. But regardless, I just don't agree with the premise. And I know what they mean. They're acknowledging the dichotomy between high and low art, between smart art and dumb art, between challenging art and easy art. Ultimately, it's the difference between what brings rapture to our soul and what is simply enjoyable. I find two problems with this argument. One,
is every time you do assert a duality, you're implying almost every single time that one of them is better or more primary than the other. When you're talking about the spirit versus the flesh, you're talking about the transcendent spirit that elevates above the flesh.
Whenever we divide things into a dichotomy, we inherently elevate one. And rapture is not better than enjoyment. They are both beautiful and necessary human experiences that take effort and skill for art to successfully produce. 2. It's false. Art does not need to be smart or challenging or existential in order to create rapture, and I want to talk about a couple examples of that. Fully Cooley is an absurdist 6-episode OVA series where a boy is hit by an evil alien girl's Vespa. She whacks him on the head with a guitar. A robot comes out of his head for some reason. A girl gets cat ears. His dad's replaced by a robot. An evil space organization wants to take over the universe using giant irons. There are a lot of dick jokes, and important story beats go by entirely too fast to understand, and it is all so incredibly random and silly and incomprehensible. If that all sounds confusing, it is. I tell anyone interested in the show not to focus too much on the plot. Fully Cooley was created by Kazuya Tsurumaki, a young animator at Gainax Studios who had previously worked on the wildly successful anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. Evangelion is a heady meditation on depression, disaster, and what it means to be human, disguising itself as a giant robot show. Well, I guess a lot of giant robot shows do that. But the point is that you can't really engage with Evangelion without getting into the deep philosophical nature of it. And although you can engage deeply with Fully Cooley, that's not really the point of it.
Fully Cooley is the antithesis of brainy, dense shows that demand analysis like Evangelion.
And take that from the creator. When asked about his series, Tsurumaki said, "With Evangelion, there was this feeling that you had better be smart to understand it, or even just to work on it. With Fully Cooley, I want to say that it's okay to feel stupid." And in the process of creating this silly and random series and celebrating adolescence in the general spirit of being dumb, he made a masterpiece that has been beloved worldwide. It has meant more to me than almost any show I've ever watched, and I'm not alone.
Probably one of my top 5 experiences in all of media consumption was watching the show Fully Cooley as a young man.
I think Jeff Thu of the YouTube channel Mother's Basement said it best in his video on the series.
As we grow up and our tastes develop, it can be easy to forget, especially for those of us who become professional critics, what got us interested in movies or games or anime or TV shows in the first place. Because it probably wasn't the way those things provoked our minds and got us thinking about the nature of our existence. It was probably some combination of sound and motion that spoke to us on a primal level.
I agree. The magic of media does not exclusively reside in what is existential and difficult. Sometimes it's much more simple and primal, and sometimes it's just silly. Another example of incredibly silly media that tells you it's okay to be stupid is the 2022 film Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is a movie about an Asian American woman who is struggling with her taxes. There are a lot of things I could say to you to impress upon you the silliness of this film. For instance, there is a villain named Jobu Tupaki with a delightfully random wardrobe who murders people with imagination and sex toys, but suffice it to say, a movie that utilizes Chekhov's butt plug is not trying to win any Oscars.
I feel like part of my job was reminding people, like, we're not making an Oscar movie here.
But it did. It won 7, including Best Picture. The main people in charge of deciding what is good and smart, the people who decide what is high art, the Academy itself, said Everything Everywhere All at Once was worthy. And they did that because it is. Because in addition to being incredibly silly, Everything Everywhere All at Once is also deeply introspective, telling the story of a mother struggling to find meaning in a dissatisfying world where anything could be anything else. It elevates the idea of love when most would choose violence. It is existential in nature and taught me the value of positive nihilism. If meaning isn't set, we can give it to whatever we want. I walked away from this film with a new understanding of the word. I also misled you about Fully Cooley. It's not just dick jokes, it is so much more. You can find hours and hours of content of people picking apart and analyzing this show's imagery and themes. It is an incredibly affecting meditation on growing up. I don't think I've ever seen boyhood captured as effectively.
This surreal mindfuck of a show had more to say about boyhood and growing up and like experiencing puberty than any generic Western versions of this same story.
These media examples use an incredibly effective tension between smart and dumb aesthetics to tell their stories. Because being dumb and fun and simple can be incredibly useful. My favorite example of a film that uses this tension is Babylon. Babylon is a film set in the 1920s that tells the story of the transition from silent film to the talkies, but it becomes so much larger than that. This movie is kind of obsessed with the smart-dumb dichotomy that I've been talking about. It aims to use excess and vulgarity to tell such an astonishingly personal story, and it all culminates in its central message of loving movies. Not good movies, not smart movies, just movies. Just film. Brad Pitt's character is Jack Conrad, one of the biggest actors in the world who is struggling with his changing industry. In a particularly affecting scene, he is running lines with his wife, who is a trained Broadway actor. He receives the devastating news of the loss of a friend, and then he gives this speech.
So, what I would suggest there would be to play subtext rather than... Honey, are you okay?
It's not a low art, you know. What I do means something to millions of people. My folks didn't have the money or the education to go to the theater, so they went to the vaudeville houses, and then the Nickelodeons, and you know what? There's beauty there. What happens up on that screen means something. Maybe not to you in your ivory tower, but for real people on the ground, it means something.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Of course you don't. 100,000 people see you on Broadway and it's the smash of the century, right? Well, here it's a flop. So do me a favor, darling. Save your subtext recommendations for your pretentious Eugene O'Neill, Henrik Ibsen jerk-offs that only a handful of rich geriatrics give two fucks about, and I'll do what I do without your help.
So, ignoring the fact that he is yelling at a woman who very much does not deserve it, I really sympathize with Pitt's character here. I, like him, viscerally remember the small and disrespected movies that created my love of film. I also want to yell at this pretentious word that values subtext over text. I want to scream that my dumb little movies and interests, they aren't dumb. They're life itself. I get how it feels when the word deems the thing you love low art. But the really interesting thing about this scene is that Jack is wrong. His wife is not trying to demean him or his art form. She is just trying to help. And by the end of the movie, and in real life, the Broadway trained actors who spent their lives perfecting the art of effectively speaking to an audience, they will be the leading film actors of their generation. And similarly, no matter how bad Babylon director Damien Chazelle wants his film to be the pinnacle of low art, the champion of the common people, no matter how much sex and exploitation he crams into it, no matter how many pompous douchebags he literally pukes on, no matter how many poop jokes he works into the script.
I think people want that, though, sound in their movies.
Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, though, sound in their movies? Think people want that, thoug Yeah, why wouldn't they?
No matter whatever Tobey Maguire's weird little gremlin character was supposed to be, no matter how low the metascore of his film is, Babylon will always be a 3-hour art film that was nominated for 3 Oscars and honestly should have been nominated for more. It is high art. It is existential. It is what we mean when we say good. If we go back to Laura Krone's Super Eye Patch with Immediate Processing's good art dichotomies, then we can clearly see that Fully Cooley, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Babylon fit snugly into their other/bad media categories. These are good things to watch when you're tired or don't want to turn your brain on. They are wild and fun and just a really good time. But they also challenge us intellectually and emotionally. They also deeply explore the human condition. They also fit into the good category. Sometimes there isn't a dichotomy between high art and low art. Some things are just both. And I don't think that's a revolutionary statement, and I don't think any of the YouTubers I'm arguing with would disagree, but I just wanted to show that good art is hard to contain. It can be smart and dumb at the same time. But we can go further. What about art that isn't secretly smart or challenging or existential? What about art that's just stupid? So, if we're talking about art dichotomies, I want to talk about my 2 favorite films of 2023, Past Lives and Bottoms. Past Lives is about the enduring relationship between 2 childhood friends tragically separated by circumstance as they confront notions of love and destiny in their lifetime. It is longing and devastating. Bottoms is about 2 unpopular high school students starting a fight club in order to have sex before graduation. It is girly, gay, and fun. Past Lives introduced me to the Korean concept of inyan, the belief that in every life we are slowly building connections that will mature across lifetimes. Bottoms introduced me to the concept of girls making out while Charlie XCX plays. Past Lives is deeply existential in a way that somehow makes me mourn every past love I've ever had. Bottoms is deeply awesome in a way that makes me remember the scene where 2 girls made out while Charlie XCX plays. Past Lives is full of deeply romantic quotes like, "It's true that if you leave, you lose things, but you also gain things too. What if this is a past life as well, and we are already something else to each other in our next life? You dream in a language I can't understand. It's like there's this whole place inside you I can't go. I liked you for who you are, and who you are as a person who leaves. But for him, you're the person who stays." Bottoms has quotes like,
"I'm sorry that I looked at Mrs. Riley and lightly grazed her left tit.
Could the ugly, untalented gays please report to the principal's office?
I'm gonna finally reverse stalk my stalker.
I literally saw you yesterday.
Shut up, nerd! I fucked your mom!
I'm getting revenge. I'm gonna fuck up some football players and I'm buying a gun. Hell yeah.
and of course, the point is, these movies are very different. But if you ask me, they are both the very best of what the year 2023 has to offer us in the media of film. And barring some Hail Mary of a film I might see in December, Bottoms is my favorite of the year. And I think it is absolutely glorious. And it's also pretty dumb. And you might be wondering if it's secretly smart or existential or dense like Fully Cooley and Everything Everywhere All at Once were. It's not. The hero journey our protagonists go on is that they start off as kind of scummy and then they just don't grow much. They're still pretty much dirtbags by the end of the film. Where Everything Everywhere All at Once imparts on us the theme of love by having the final battle consist of intimate gestures rather than violence. Bottom just gives us the violence. And there are a lot of jokes in this movie that feminists would like.
What is the point of this assignment? Who is Bell Hooks and why do we care?
Nice try, PJ, but my vagina belongs to the government.
I thought this club was for sisterhood, but it was for your own selfish interests. This is the second wave all over again.
But the movie doesn't really have a feminist message. The only women this movie is trying to empower are the ones who are teenage dirtbags. And honestly, that's pretty metal. Feminist scholar Kate Willett introduced us to the concept of the glass gutter. In her 2017 speech of the same name, she laments that there are a lot of institutional obstacles to being a scumbag lady, and that women aren't going to be equal until we can pass out in some more places. I think Bottoms is a bit about the beauty of breaking through that glass gutter, so I will not abide anyone trying to lift it up into something classy or respectable. The school mascot has like a 3-foot cock, for goodness sake. The movie wants to be trashy.
And I'm stupid, and I want to do stupid things.
The simple fact is, Past Lives is everything Laura Crone's Super Eye Patch with immediate processing describe as good art, and Bottoms isn't. It is not a deep dive into the human condition. It doesn't confront you with the existentialism of mortality. It's not emotionally or intellectually challenging. It doesn't teach new things about the word or the written word or the human experience in a deep and resonant way. And while Past Lives checks all of those boxes and Bottoms falls squarely into the other category, does that mean that Past Lives is better? Is it more important? Some would say yes, but personally, I just think both are masterpieces. And, I don't really even think these YouTubers would disagree with me. Bottoms is such an obvious triumph, and it is very beloved. And I don't know if any of these YouTubers have a public opinion about the film, but if they did, I imagine it would only be a glowing review. They probably would not call it bad. But whether on purpose or maybe just carelessly, they have categorically placed it outside the context of good art. Some more than others. Laura Crone qualified her statement a lot.
Don't get it twisted, this is not actually about objectivity versus subjectivity. Good and bad are just as subjective as liking and disliking. So, important obvious does not mean self-evident, because it is extremely to do with cultural traditions and values and institutions and sieves of time. And a good number of those traditions and values and institutions, suck. Look, I think in the long term, we need, somehow, a different word for this. A way to talk about this judgment we subconsciously learn to make subconsciously, but also maybe does not carry the connotation of inherent quality judgment.
She makes sure we know that good and bad are cultural definitions that can be flawed. She is also the only person I'm responding to who actually had the common decency to not like the things she's calling bad art, and she spends nearly 3 hours explaining why. Please watch her video, it is amazing. Media Processing's comment was not made in the form of a scripted video, so we should take it with a grain of salt and charity. Quick side note, Media Processing recently expanded on his Ready or Not take in a video about Saltburn. In the new video, he lists valid criticisms of the film.
Sure, the twist might have been a little predictable, and maybe the societal commentary was a tad ham-fisted.
Although I still believe that Laura Crone would disagree.
And it says what it has to say, yes, with some hams for fists, but supported by a level of clarity and structure that is, frankly, surprising in the best way possible.
He also qualifies his statement.
Its failure by one metric does not preclude it from success by another.
But ultimately, he still ends up defining fun out of quality.
It could have been a airtight, unimpeachable work of cinema. But if it were, do you think it'd be quite as fun?
I offered no apologetics for Super Eye Patch Wolf. He categorically defined Riverdale as bad art, even though he loves it, just because he doesn't check the right boxes or whatever, and I find that quite silly. Watch my Twilight vs. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood video to know exactly how I feel about that one, but regardless, they all said the same thing. They all express this pervasive and flawed view on the nature of beauty, and I think that's worth examining, because any definition of good art that does not include bottoms is, in my opinion, unworkably broken. If you've seen any of my other videos, you may know that my whole thing, the reason I get out of bed in the morning, is to tell people that Twilight is an obvious masterpiece, and the fact that we as a society and a culture label it as bad is a travesty. Because of that, I've become particularly sensitive to the ways we continue to perpetrate this flawed belief. And I think this narrow definition of beauty is one of them. While it is important to be critical and isolate and analyze the things we like about art, we need to stop saying that good art is A or B when it could be anything. And we need to stop categorizing the things we like and bring us joy as lesser art forms. And when we have the thought that good art has to be difficult or existential, we should challenge that, because that is a thought that immediately disqualifies so many beautiful things. And I think girly media is particularly disadvantaged by this idea. My favorite band this year is Boy Genius, and they chose that name because they wanted to channel the reckless bravado that boys are just allowed to have. And that's not a bad thing, because when people say that the silly little Marvels or Dragon Ball Zs that boys like are bad and dumb, they say no. They defend the striving genius of Akira Toriyama. They will take down Martin Scorsese himself if they have to. They will not let their silly little miracles be degraded. But oftentimes, it seems like when the silly little things girls like are degraded, so tired are we from just defending their right to exist at all. We stop at saying, just let me like my silly little things, instead of acknowledging the genius of it all. It kind of reminds me of the way that so often I hear people, even serious reviewers, refer to the CW or Netflix as bad words.
I just need to talk about the CW network for a bit. They can't even accidentally produce something watchable. Every show they have makes me wish television was never invented in the first place.
As if it is just so obvious that they make content of a lesser quality. I have just never understood the way that so many people brazenly disparage the CW when it gave us honestly some of the best shows ever made, an entire third of the Super Who-like fandom, the most successful TV superhero extended universe, and so many of the very best and influential teen dramas of my generation. Actually, I do understand. It's because a lot of the content is girly dramas, and we as a society hate that. The problem is that when we define good art as smart and important and kind of boring, it becomes so difficult to defend these beautiful things, and then we end up saying they're not good, even if we love them. And everyone just keeps thinking girly things aren't worth it. Guilty pleasures at best. That's why this is important to me. That's why when I hear all of these different people expressing this small thought, it affects me and I want to talk about it. In conclusion, I do not think any of the YouTubers I'm responding to are bad people or are bad at media analysis. I actually like them a lot and think they are way smarter than me. Please check out their videos if you haven't. I just think that this specific way in which art can be limited is a common sentiment that we should be more conscious of and reevaluate. And I so understand the urge to defend the ideas that we as a culture generally don't value in art, like mediocrity and repetition and just silliness. These values are the building blocks of tropes and genre, and I watch so many schlocky rom-coms and horror movies all the time, and it doesn't really matter if they're good. Like, was Cocaine Bear a good movie?
As Nicole Kidman said, we come to Cocaine Bear for magic.
Maybe?
This movie will be conservatively 1 billion times better than Citizen Kane. Conservatively.
I gotta say, it does what it says on the tin, and that's valuable. And a lot of people, including myself, love that sort of thing. And putting it in a good box or a bad box is really just arbitrary. The point is, just like all of these YouTubers, I think it is incredibly important and beautiful to defend bad art. But I don't think we can really accomplish that if we continue to limit the nature of what we think is good. Because as I have repeatedly stated, good art does not need to be smart or exhausting or existential or even particularly well made. It can be anything. So, the next time you find something wonderful and moving, but for whatever reason it just doesn't check the right boxes, who cares? Do not define it out of beauty. If you want to defend bad art, don't cede your ground. Don't call it bad. Call it good. Call it wonderful. Call it beautiful. And if we get rid of this silly notion that art is this specific thing with a specific purpose, hopefully we can stop limiting beauty and start expanding it. Hey, thanks so much for watching. So, earlier when I was comparing Past Lives and Bottoms, I originally wrote in the script that Past Lives is like a beautiful reimagining of Before Sunset, while Bottoms is like a chaotic mashup of Fire It Up and Compound Enter the Fist. I didn't end up using it because I'm not sure if it works, but I found it funny, so I'm putting it here. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, come back next week for a video where I definitively prove that the actual reason people think Twilight is bad is because a group of invading aliens with the ability to completely erase all memory of their presence when not being actively perceived told us to. I forgot I wrote that. Why did I write that?